You know, we walk past them every single day, but plants are constantly fighting this hidden, high stakes battle for survival. So today, we're going to dive right into their secret world to figure out how on earth they do it. Seriously, have you ever really stopped to wonder how a tiny little plant makes it through a brutal heat wave? Or how some crops can actually grow in salty soil? It seems like it should be impossible, right? But it turns out plants have this incredible survival playbook written deep, deep inside their cells. So let's explore how they pull it off.
All right, so first things first, we've got to understand the enemy. What exactly happens when a plant gets stressed?
Yeah, when we talk about plant stress, we're not talking about them having a tough week at the office or missing a deadline. For a plant, stress is any external condition that threatens its very existence. We're talking about anything that messes with its ability to grow, or even its ability to produce the food we all depend on. Okay, so these threats, they basically come in two main flavors. You've got biotic stress, which comes from other living things. Think viruses, nasty insects, that sort of thing. But what we're really going to focus on today is abiotic stress. That's the stuff from the non-living environment, like drought, extreme heat, and super salty soil. And let me tell you, the damage from these stressors is serious. Just imagine all the tiny machinery inside a plant cell. Extreme heat can literally cause its most important proteins to unravel and lose their shape. It's a process called denaturation. The best way to think about it is like cooking an egg. The protein changes, and you can't uncook it, right? Same thing here. Salty soil is just as bad. It can stop the plant from absorbing water. It's a full-on assault that can shut down photosynthesis and just wreck the cell. So, the big question is, how does a plant fight back? I mean, it can't just get up and run away. Well, this is where things get really, really cool. They become these little master chemists, performing just incredible feats right there at the cellular level. So, broadly speaking, you can think of it like a plant's version of fight or flight. They have two main strategies. Some plants use avoidance. Think of an alfalfa plant growing these ridiculously deep roots to find water when there's a drought. But other plants choose tolerance. This is the fight part. They stay put, and instead they radically change their internal chemistry to just withstand the pressure. And when a plant decides to tolerate stress, wow, the instant it senses danger, like a sudden spike in salt in the soil, it's like a switch is flipped. It triggers this internal alarm. This alarm is this super complex chain reaction of molecular signals. It's like a cellular emergency broadcast system, telling every single part of the cell to get ready for action. You can actually boil that whole complex process down to 3 simple steps: sense, send, and respond. So first, little receptors on the cell surface have to sense the danger. Second, a whole cascade of messengers send that signal deep into the cell. And finally, that signal activates specific genes that launch the response. It's just so elegant, and it happens incredibly fast. Okay, theory is great, but let's see this playbook in action, right? Let's zoom in on a real-world fight against one of the toughest abiotic villains a plant can face: salt. And the danger is immediate. The second that salt hits the soil, the plant's growth rate just tanks. This first shockwave is called osmotic stress. Basically, the super high salt concentration outside the roots acts like a magnet for water, literally pulling it right out of the plant and causing it to dehydrate fast. But here's the thing. The cell does not just give up. In a classic example of that tolerance strategy, it activates a very specific defense protocol. It's called the salt overly sensitive pathway, or, much easier, the SOS pathway. This is basically the cell's battle map, showing how it starts to manage the flood of toxic sodium ions that are trying to invade. At the very heart of this response, you've got this heroic little trio of proteins. Think of them like a cellular rescue team. First up is SOS3. It's the sensor, the lookout. It detects the emergency signal. Then it activates SOS2, who's like the team captain. And SOS2 gives the order to SOS1. And SOS1, well, it's the muscle. It's a transporter that acts like a bouncer at a club door, actively kicking those toxic sodium ions right back out of the cell. Okay, but what about the sodium that sneaks past the bouncer, right? The cell has another brilliant trick up its sleeve. It takes that excess sodium and just shoves it into this big cellular storage unit called the vacuole. It's exactly like locking poison away in a safe deposit box, where it can't do any harm to the important machinery in the rest of the cell. All right, so plants have ways of keeping toxins out. But what happens when stress still manages to cause damage inside the cell? Well, that's when you call in the internal cleanup crew. And here they are. Meet the cell's emergency mechanics, the heat shock proteins, or HSPs for short. Seriously, these proteins are the absolute superstars of damage control, and they are essential when the heat is on. So a healthy protein needs a very specific, folded shape to do its job. But stress, like heat, causes it to denature, to unfold, and then it's useless. Even worse, these unfolded proteins can start clumping together into these toxic messes. You can think of it like sludge building up in an engine. It just grinds everything to a halt. And that's where the HSPs jump in. They're the expert cleanup crew, and their job is to either refold these damaged proteins or get rid of them. And you've got to see how some of these work up close. This is one called HSP60, and it's just incredible. It acts like this tiny molecular machine. It grabs an unfolded protein, pulls it inside a protective chamber, and then uses energy to create the absolute perfect environment for that protein to refold correctly. It's basically a private repair bay for molecules. I mean, it is an astonishing feat of engineering. This entire system of protein quality control, from making them to fixing them to getting rid of them, it has a name. It's called proteostasis. It sounds a little complicated, but just break it down. Proteo for protein and stasis for balance. So it's literally all about keeping the cell's proteins in balance. And this is absolutely critical for survival, especially when it's under stress.
So why does all of this microscopic drama matter to us? Well, here's the payoff. Because by understanding these incredible survival mechanisms, scientists can actually start to engineer what you might call superplants.
We can take what we've learned and apply it directly. For example, by boosting the genes for those vacuolar pumps we talked about, the safe deposit boxes, we can make plants way better at locking away salt. We can also give them genes to produce protective molecules that help with that water loss stress. And by enhancing their natural heat shock protein response, we can make them much more resilient to heat waves. And all of this brings us to one final really big question. As our climate changes, as conditions become more and more extreme, the silent molecular battles happening inside these plant cells, well, they become more important than ever. So you have to wonder, could harnessing these microscopic shields be the key to ensuring our global food security and feeding our future? It's a pretty powerful thought to end on.